Welcome back to CAD8407. It's week 6. Today we're going to discuss creating and using text dimension styles and leader styles, discuss annotative scale at an object level as well as at a drawing level, and then we're going to learn commands that we'll need for our term project. Those will be the rectang tool, array, specifically the rectangular array, the hatch command, the scale command, text, be it single or multi-line text, how to add dimensions and multi-leaders to your drawing. So as always, go to template, scroll down and find no template imperial. And type units at the command line or go to the AutoCAD A, drawing utilities, units. Switch this to architectural. 1/16 of an inch is fine. Click OK. Now, first thing we want to discuss is styles. Now there's two documents on Brightspace, one being the weekly note and a overview on creating text and dimension styles in Imperial, which is a series of screenshots with values attached to them. While that information is important, it shows you the different settings and whatnot, but use the settings that are in this video in relationship to the style names and the various values attached to it. So, first thing we need to do is create a bunch of styles. And all of our style information is going to be coming from this annotation panel. Specifically from annotation, that little drop down. And what you're going to do is click on one of these values to create a style for text, dimension, or multi-leader. These icons are all going to be influenced by what you have here. So if you're creating a text style, you're going to be creating the object here, a dimension here, a leader here. So you have to make sure these are set correctly to do what you want. And right now they're all the standard one that came with CAD, which is standard. So you can open up the drop down and click Manage Text Styles here, or just click on the little icon to the left of the drop down. So first thing we want to do is create a text style. Now with text styles, we want to create ones for various sizes that we're going to typically use. So things for our notes, our dimension text is going to be a certain height. We could have a drawing title that's using a larger text height. And then we could have one in the middle. So that's one part of it. Now the other part is, how is that font going to look? And in AutoCAD we have two options. We have these TT fonts, the little icon, or you have the one that looks like a compass with an A that ends in .shx. Those SHX fonts are going to cause you nothing but grief when you are doing printing next week. So use the TT fonts. It's called a true type font, and those true type fonts are what's installed on your system. And in my case I have a fair few. So for your class, let us use Let's use City Blueprint, and that'll give you an example of how that style will be represented in letters and numbers. So let's cancel that for a minute. I've already done something I shouldn't have, leading you down the bad path. So this standard here, never ever use it. You can use it as a template for a new one, but don't change anything here. Always create a new, because standard is something that AutoCAD is going to default to, and it will come to bite you later on, especially in CAD 2. So for a style name, usually we go with what is the font type and what is the size. So, and that could be something as simple as what is the unit size. So if we were in metric, we could say 2 mm for 2 millimeters. If we're in imperial, we have to rethink how we want to do it. And you have to be very mindful of later on in the semester, we're going to be having possible things come in that I give you that might start impacting your other styles as well. So we have to be, there has to be some consensus across the board. So let us do, let's just say it's going to be a large font. And because we're only going to be having one type of font, we could just say large. Now large, let us, let's pick veranda. Now this here, this size equals annotative checkbox here, that's going to be impacted based on this value right here. If it is not annotative, this height here is always going to be that height. So if you want to have on paper a height that is 6 inches high in veranda, you would put 6 inches. And in model space, it will also be 6 inches. However, you're only going to use non-annotative text on layout. And we can discuss it next week briefly, but for now, create just annotative text because we are in model space this week. So we've always been working in this model tab. So for now, just click annotative here. Leave this always unchecked. Now, we have to decide what our heights are going to be. So for large, let's do 5/32 and hit tab. Now you'll notice that because we'd set our units at 16-inch precision, this is going to be rounding up to 3/16 of an inch. However, it is actually 5/32s. So why don't we apply this and then let's go correct our units. So units, and we'll drop this to 64ths because we will be needing that for another unit. So we come back here. Now you'll see it says 5/32. So we know it is right. And we'll set this width factor to be 0.95 and apply. Now that we have one with all the settings we want, when we have this selected, we can say new and then just make our next one, which will be medium. And our medium height is going to be 1/8 of an inch. And no other value has to change. We can just hit apply. And now our last one will be small, and that will be 5/64 of an inch. So small, medium, and large. Because I made small last, that is current text style, so that's good. Sorry, cancel that for a minute. So here, remember, we're using veranda, and our width factor is 0.95 for these. Large is 532, medium is 1/8 of an inch, small is 5/64. So those are the values you're going to use for your house elevations. Now we need to set up a dimension style. Here we have two, and look at the preview between them. It says radius 0.8 with a little jog, while annotative, it looks the same, so that's fine. We can pick either one as a starting point. So we'll create new, and we'll just call this adim. And if we wanted to change to standard here and say use standard as our starting point, we could. We want to make sure it's annotative, and we're going to use it for all dimensions, not just linear or angular. So all of them, and hit continue. So what this will do, it will give us a dialog box of all of our additional values. Excuse me. So we'll have lines, symbols. So these arrowheads are what you're seeing here. Text is what style it's using, what color it's representing as, how tall it is, and how it's going to be implemented across this example. And then units. So first tab we want to change is symbols and arrows, and change the arrowheads. Because if we did lines first, this extend beyond ticks is grayed out, and that's one of the settings we want to manipulate. So symbols and arrows, change to architectural tick, and it does the second one for us, so we see the change already. Our closed filled arrowhead is fine. Now our arrowhead size will be 1/8 of an inch. And you'll notice that it doesn't necessarily update correctly, and that's because of the text, as we still are using a poor style. So we're set at none here. These are all fine. We're not modifying any of these settings. Now we can go to lines, and here we're going to create a uniform look across the board here. So wherever it says by block, we're going to change it to say by layer. So that means whatever layer you draw this on, it will take those values into consideration. Sorry about that. Oh, I gotta start over. Just canceled out without saving. Okay, so where were we here? That was 1/8 of an inch. Those stayed the same, and we jumped over to lines, and everything that says by block here will be converted to by layer. So these extension lines are these ones that are jutting out from the object, and the dimension line is what you're having in this example above and below the number. The extend beyond ticks is currently 0, and we want to have that as 3/32. And our baseline here can be 6 inches. We don't use baseline, so it doesn't matter. And we are going to set this as well to 3/32. And that just is how above the line and below and out past the extension. And then the last one is the gap between the object. Like you see, the object is here and then the line starts a little bit higher. That's this offset from origin. So we refine with symbols and arrows. Now text. We're going to use our small text and we're going to change the color to be yellow. Now, because we're using annotative, our text height is locked. This fractional height is currently locked, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, all of our angles, or we're having an aligned dimension here or a vertical one, we're seeing all the numbers horizontally. We're going to set that to be aligned with dimension. This will get fixed in a moment. Our text placement will be above the line, and our offset from the dimension line is really personal preference, but a 1/16 is a pretty safe bet. Here, I would suggest you always keep between extension lines and draw a dim line even if you don't have space. So if you see like this number here is so long that it's basically going from extension to extension, we're just telling it to always draw one. Now this here, this is essentially a leader because it's drawing it under and pointing it to here, of saying that this value is in relationship to here. Now I don't like that leader, so I use the bottom one here, and you don't want it next to it because when you have more than one dimension next to each other, you have this possible chance, especially in metric, to have it merge together. And if you're doing whole numbers, that number could be accidentally become very large because the numbers are so close together they look like they are meant to go together. So always have it above the line, so it's going to push it out somewhere else up here in relationship to the other numbers. And when I do an example, I'll explain this. Primary units are architectural. Now our precision here is going to be 1/4 of an inch. And this fractional format right now, as you can see, it's doing stacked one above each other. We want it to be diagonal. If you say not stacked, it will look like you're typing it on the keyboard. But diagonal, we can have it use a little bit less space by coming back here to text and changing this. So instead of it being a full height fraction, we can drop it down to be 75% of full height text. Now, we leave this as is. We're not changing anything here. The only thing we're going to change is this zero suppression. So right now, it is saying that's anything under 12 inches, so 11 inches and 3/4 and down based on our precision. We want to see if, depending on the client, they might say I want to see 0 feet in front of all our measurements. Or they might want to see that. But for us, we want this. We're only wanting to have 0 feet. So if it's under 1 foot, it'll be to show inches. Whereas we had suppress 0, you could have 1 foot instead of having 1 foot dash 0 feet, or 0 inches, excuse me. So we're going to suppress just 0 feet. Now, if we were going to show our units for metric as well, this is where you would do it. But since we're just in an imperial drawing, we will use the imperial measure, and that's it. So you can just scroll Scroll back through these in the video, set the appropriate values. So set these here, small, yellow. Remember, you have to go to primary units first, and then come back here to set this value. Above, offset from dim, aligned, always, over without leader. The last one. Now, if you forgot to set it annotative, this is where you would set it. And our primary of architectural, 1/4 inch, diagonal. And we are going to only suppress 0 feet and click OK. And it sets it by default because we just made it. Now our last one here is multi-leader. So this is going to duplicate the look of the style we just made. So we have started with standard, so we're going to make a new one. And we'll just call it leaders. And it's going to be annotative. And hit continue. Excuse me. So here we have 3 tabs when creating a multi-leader style. We have the content, we have the structure, so that means this portion here, how it's going to interact, and how it looks. So is it a straight line? Is this curved? What color is it? Is it a dashed line? What kind of arrowhead we're using? Now, because we're going to be duplicating the look and feel of the dimension style we just made, we're going to change this to be by layer, by layer, by layer. Arrowhead size was 1/8 of an inch. Leader structure is always going to be an angled line and a straight line, so our second segment will be 0. And here we could say, so this landing distance from the angle straight is going to be this value here by default. So let's say, let's start off with 1/8 of an inch and see how that looks. And if you didn't set it annotative, this is where you would do it. Content, it's text. The other options are block. Now our text style is going to be the same as the one we used before, which is small. Keep horizontal. Our text color is going to be the same yellow. Now here, what this is referring to is this is the attachment side. So on the horizontal attachment, aka left and right, we're going to have, when it's the leaders on the left side, we're going to have the middle of top line. And when the leaders on the right, it'll be at the bottom. So the middle of bottom line. And our landing gap, so the space between the arrowhead and the text will be 1/16 of an inch. So just pause the video and set these values appropriately. And it's set at current. Tables we're not going to discuss. So now that they're set, you're going to access them as multi-line text or single-line text through here. And you're going to set through circles, angles. If it's an angled line where you're saying that along this line it is this long, or vertical and horizontal dimensions is this linear one. And leaders is the one that we just set down here. So let's create So I'm just going to scale this up real quick. So down here, these three icons are relating to annotative scale. This icon is currently selected is Show All Annotative Objects. The one next to it with the lightning bolt is never to be used on pain of death. Usually yours because you have to go back and fix it once you broke it. And then this one here, which sets the annotative scale. So in a metric drawing, these would be listed as 1:50, which is the equivalent to this one. You have 1 foot, 1 inch equals a foot. So that means for every inch in model, it's actually 1 foot in real life. And in metric, the equivalent would be 1 drawing unit is 50 units. So you're always going to be doing some scaling factor, one or the other. So let's set this to 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. Now this is one of those things you set it and forget it, and it has to be done before you create any annotative object. So text, dimensions, liters, as well as blocks, but you won't get to dynamic or annotative blocks until next semester. So for now, just everything that's in here is going to be impacted by this value here. Building materials are not affected. You are drawing actual size. If you have a window that is 2 feet by 4 feet, that is what you're drawing in CAD. So now, what I can do is dimension from here to here with linear. And I guess before I do that, let's start managing our layers, as we learned about that in week 3. So we're going to create a layer called adim. And on this layer is going to be our dimensions, only our dimensions. We are going to have a notes layer. These are going to be liters and anything that has text on it. Now our A notes are going to be yellow. So remember, only these 3/7. Our dimension is going to be blue. Now remember how I said that we're doing everything by layer? So if this line type on dimension was not continuous, but say a dashed line, it would be reflected in the drawing as well. So let's make adim current and pick linear. So we're going to pick from this point to here. Now let's play with LT scale. So you can see here where it's showing the dim line is a dashed line and the extension line is a dashed line because it's a bilayer. So let's go the other direction, 1.5. Oops, sorry. Does not want to do it. But trust me, it will show up as a dashed line, and that's not what you want. So let's force that back to continuous, because that's what we want ultimately. So linear to here. And what you're doing is clicking on 2 registration points. So from the end of this to that vertex there. And what you'll see is as soon as you add a dimension, you get this layer called def points. And it's a special layer. You'll see that it's grayed out. It means you cannot manipulate this. And you cannot delete it. It's not one of those special layers. Now what that layer is doing is so there is a dot here, right where that grip is, and one here. Those 2 points are what it's using to determine this length here. Now if I end up stretching this object, the dimension is also going to adjust. Now if I want to continue on and dimension from here to here, what I can do is if I hover over this grip, I will get an entry called continue dimension, which allows me to do here or here and so on and so on. And you'll see how it's 5 1/4, then it gets to 1 and it jumps over to immediately showing the number of feet. So that's where the suppression is coming from. So this is called continuing a dimension, and if I wanted to go the other way, I would hover over and click this one to go this way. Now you'll notice when I hovered over, I got this one called stretch dimension group. And what that does, it allows me to stretch all of them as a group, instead of doing this and just stretching this one. You are going to waste so much time trying to line these things up that do it right the first time, then you won't have to. So once again, select, hover, continue, click, and escape when you're done. And that will still be selected, so you'll want to hit escape again. And if I want to work the other way, I can go from here to here. And in properties here, you'll notice that it now shows that it's annotative, and it shows you what scale it's annotative at. Now to dimension this, we can say that we know from here to here it's this distance, and from here to here it's that, and then we can just do an angular dimension of from here to here and say that I can draw from here 68 degrees up, but these 2 values aren't helpful. Well, this one could be, depending on what's up here, but this one is not, because we want what this value is from here to here. So you have to be mindful of what dimensions you have on a drawing and see which ones you have and which ones you don't have. Because if you don't have enough, then you can't build it. And you want to avoid this case where you've got something running through something else. So you can click on that grip and turn off ortho and just migrate the number a bit, or hover over the menu and get that menu, and you can say move text. Move text with leader for this style is not ideal, but for this one it could be. So you say move with leader. So what that'll do is give you something along this lines, saying that this line here is attached to this dimension with this value. And if you realized you don't like that, you can say reset text position. You can just move it, and you might have a case like this where you realized you goofed, and then just say above dimension line. And to avoid this, it's not a big deal, but if you have a bunch of small connected, so say for instance, so that's that one. So you have very small cavities like this. You have to decide how you're going to showcase these. So in this case, having it with leader is helpful because you know that this number is attached to the middle one. And you could say that one. What you could do here is migrate this one out over here and then shift this one over. Now if you have this case going on, all you're going to do is say above dimension line, and it'll just shift it up enough so this is continuous. So as long as you can read the numbers and there's no overlapping of them, you are good to go. So now if I want this line distance along the angle, I can't use linear, but I can use aligned. So from that endpoint to that endpoint. So now if you were trying to duplicate this, you could say I'm here and I'm going to be at 3 feet 6 inches along 68 degrees. Now this line and this line are parallel to each other. So with this angle, this distance, it gives us enough information to draw that line here. Now if you were drawing circles or a radius, you would use these. So that's how a radius would look. And a diameter would look like that. And it shows you that it's a radius with an R or a diameter symbol for a diameter. And you'll notice that when you select these, it updates here. So if you're doing another diameter, you could just click here without going through the drop down. Now for leaders, as I said, leaders will be notes. So we'll click here. And then what we're going to do is click here and say, this is a circle. So this short horizontal line was made for us because we told it the next segment is solely to be a solid line. Now with here you have a grip here, so you can manipulate, so you change your mind, you want it there now. Here you have an option to add another arrowhead, so we can say that and then escape to stop making new ones. You can stretch from the arrow out. You can double click on the text and then you can start entering like a editor. You can add symbols by just clicking here or typing in the appropriate code next to it. Line spacing, bullets, numbering. You can add bolding and whatnot. Now, bolding, italicized, those and underline and strike through, those will affect line type, the true type fonts. So that's how it would look. Now, changing color will not affect these. It is going to be solely for a visual cue for you, but it will all print at the same, I guess, thickness, for lack of a better term. So this was the orientation for left, and right now it's not going to show a big difference here, but if I make multiple lines, let's just clear out our formatting here. So right now this is 3 lines, and everything that's on the left side is going to start at the top. And if we right click here, select it, right click, say add leader, this is how it will look. So it's saying that this last line of the text here is actually a part of this entire note. And this is just going to be stylistic choice based on your client and or your boss. And if you want to remove an arrowhead, you can hover over here, say remove. You can add, excuse me. So if I want to get rid of that one, I can just say remove. If I hover over here, it says add vertex. So what I can do is so if I had a different arrowhead here, I could have it drawing back on itself, and then this is all one piece. Now the other way to do leaders, well, I guess just for completeness, if you click in the drop down, you will see other options. But I find it's just easier to select it, right click, and find the options here, or hovering over various grips to see what options you have available to you. Now the only problem with that is as soon as you blow away, you have to remove it completely and add a new one. And then zoom in and find that arrowhead. It's not a perfect system, but it's certainly better than nothing. So you can add or remove here. And if you have, you can align them like so. But usually it's going to be, you're going to draw some line and say, I want all of mine to start their bend at this line. So I can undo that. So this is the M leader. This is the most useful. It's one object. I move the text, it moves the space, the line, everything with it. Now the other one is called cad8407, and it has settings, so you can mimic the same settings we have here. So with cad8407, you can change the settings by hitting the settings button or setting the first leader point. So pick a point, pick a next point, and we're going to hit enter here. And then we're going to put in our first line of text. Now you'll notice it's typing on the command line, so I'll hit enter here. And then I can enter a next line. And I can do a third if I want. And if I hit enter on a blank line, it will complete the command. Now you'll see that it's two objects. We have mtext and a leader. They're not attached to each other. And the other thing too is that is not a straight line because I had ortho turned off. So this is already causing problems for us. So we would have to run cad8407, change the settings to force it to be horizontal, and say a max of 2. We can have it where it's not prompting for the width because we never set that. And then just say when text is on the left, it'll be middle of top, right would be middle of bottom line. And then just click, and then put in our text. And there you have it. Now one thing to note with cad8407 and mleader both. If the distance from here to here is not large enough to show the entire arrowhead, the arrowhead will disappear. So that means just bring it out just a little bit and it'll show up. So if you just see a stick and you're looking at properties and you're seeing arrowheads is an actual arrowhead, that is your culprit. So that's leaders and dimensions. Sort of discuss text from that perspective. Now we can discuss multi-line text and single-line text. These do not work exactly the same. Multi-line text will define where we are as a start point and an end point, so we can fill up that much space. And this gives us the same editor we had with the multi-leader. Fields, we can make columns of text if we want, and then we can just start typing. We can pull down here, so this is all a part of our text area. We can grab here and adjust how our text is going to be placed. And if you want to resize this box, you can just double click on the diamond and it'll make it that size. Click to escape or you click the check mark. Now in multi-line text, there is columns is dynamic by default, and there's also a text frame option. So if you say yes, it will frame your text. Come on. So if I put a new line here and I close the editor, the frame is going to take up all that available space. If I double click, it's going to truncate it to just this space in gray here. So text frame is very useful for when you're doing room labels. So double click to edit. So say I wanted to put in a field here. I could say that I'm going to be doing 45 degrees. So let's do here. And I'll just put 45 in front. So it gives me 45 and a degree symbol. Now this will allow you to have tabs and new lines. Single line text, however, will not. Now with this, you can give it a start point or change the justification, but this justification can be adjusted later. So it will ask us for a starting point. Text rotation, always keep it at 0. You can rotate the text object later. And here, just like QLeader, you just put in text. So and if I hit enter, I will end up starting a second single line text object. So what I need to do to get out of this is click somewhere else on the screen and then hit escape. Now I have a single line text. Now I can come in here and change the justification. Now that justification, if I want this, so I'm going to use this grip, drag it to the line. So here, as you can see, the letters are coming below it. So I want to make sure that the text, I can completely see it. So I'm going to change the justification from left to bottom left. And what it'll do is I'll get 2 grips. This is giving me a little bit of a push off that line. And now the text is going to flow that direction. If I made it bottom right, I can use that grip. Here, let's get this up over here. So if I change this, it's growing that way. And if I change this back to bottom left, and it's going to grow this way. So this grip here is always going to be where you started your insertion from, and this is going to be where it's in relationship to something else. Now if you wanted something dead center, that would be middle center. So in the middle center of the text, so the midline, I can grab it from there, and then midpoint of that line, so I get half of on the bottom, half on the top. So I'll just show you that if you hit enter in the middle of this, you will end up getting 2 text boxes. And I'll click out, escape, 1 object, 2 objects. Use mtext as much as possible, unless you know something is only ever going to be single line. You can play around with what editor settings you see. Really not much in single line text. It's very simplistic. The one nice thing here is if you're always supposed to be in uppercase text, what you can do is come in here, select everything, and change case and say upper. So you don't have to delete everything and retype it. So that is text and dimensions. We have discussed our dim layer, our note layer, what def points means. So we've discussed that printout. Now the rest of this is going to be discussing some new commands relating to what you need for your activity, your term project. Let's see if I have them open. Okay, so this is elevation 1. So you're going to be creating that for me. And you're going to be creating that for me. And those are details common to both drawings. So over here, those are specific to house elevation 2. The two bigger ones here are relating to house 1, and this is for both. Now, this little bubble here with the line that says see large drawing scale, don't include that. That is just pointing out to you that there is additional information. So on our drawing, we will see these notes. We're going to see these dimensions. So let's zoom in a little bit here. So whenever you're given something, analyze it. And look at where you have dimensions. We only have dimensions up this side here. We don't have them anywhere else. So that should be a clue that you have everything you need to draw this stuff already over here. And if you look at, zoom down out a bit, you will see on the plot, you can't tell, but there are lines here. I think it's the rendering engine in here. But here, if you look at the numbers, 5 feet, 610, you know, this stuff is very symmetrical along the way. This is 1110, 1110. So just analyze what you're seeing. And you'll see that the windows are all designed the same way. They're all in the same placement, and they're in placement relationship to here. This gap here, use your eyes and you'll notice that this gap is the same here as you would here. So that's why this is not dimensioned. It's assumed that this is the same 2-foot offset up here. These symbols, I will not have you put them in. And here we will throw that in next week when we discuss our printing. So for now, ignore that. The only thing you care about is this value here, where it's 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. So in our drawing, where would we get started? Always start with this grade line. So in our layers, we're going to have a layer for the following items. A grade, and that's a cyan line. It's the thickest line we have. And we'll just explain why these colors are being used specifically versus another. We have all of these will be prefixed with the first four letters of elevation, and we're going to say this is going to be outline, and this will be red. So right dash, keep consistent. This is going to be blue. That will be a dashed line. We are going to have elevation, let's call it roof. So on the roof, this is going to be the chimney and the line, the roof line itself. As in this line of this roof. This one, however, is a little tricky. Now this one, what it is, this is the main, and this is a little further back, and that's a little further back. So this one stands up proud of the two on either side as it goes along. And the reason why, let's see if I can get it happening. See how this is a thicker line here, going around the edge? So from here over, it's thicker than that line, which is thicker than that, and that's still thinner yet. That is trying to show there is depth of a 3D model in 2D space. Yeah, so roof in elevation 1 is this, and all of the chimney, including the hatch here. We will have a elevation siding, and that will be, so this will be trim. And then we'll have the siding hatch. Hatches will always be magenta. We have the outline, we have our roof, we have our siding. Ah yes, a window. Window will be white. We have our notes layer, we have our dimension layer, we have our grade. So always make layers based on what you are actually drawing and seeing. So this will be on the notes layer, the little roof slope. This, you'll just say shingles, but you're going to use this as the hatch. And we'll get to hatch in a moment. Yeah, that's all we need. We will add 3 additional next week when we discuss printing and setting up a layout. But for now, this is what we need. So to get started, we were going to do this baby steps. So we're going to start with Windows. So let's click on Windows, make it active. And we're going to use a new command called rectangle. and we are going to draw to the left of the origin here. Then I click a point, and we're going to use the relative coordinate system. We're going to create a rectangle that's 2 feet. So at 2 feet, comma 2 feet. Enter. So that is the outside of our window. And now we want to create the inner frame that we were seeing. So you'll see in the note here, it says 2 feet by 2 feet square. And then we have an inside rectangle. Now that inside rectangle is going to be 2 inches. And we're going to color override this box and make it blue. Now everything here is still on the window layer. If you create 2 layers for your window, it is wrong. All of your window will be on a window. Now, if you'll notice, all of our windows are nice grid-like structures. So it's a row of 2, or a 2 and a 4 to make up 4 or 6 or more. So what we can do is take this and copy. Now the problem with this route is you have to make sure you are always getting this corner. You don't accidentally grab that corner. So if I grab this one, snap it over to here, I know this is okay. But what happens if I realize that, oh, this wasn't supposed to be that offset? Or it's not supposed to be blue. Say I meant it to be magenta. Now every single copy of the original I made is now garbage. It has no value. So to rectify that, we have the ability to create rectangular arrays. This button. So let's select what we want to turn into an array and click on a rectangular array. By default, it gives us 3 rows, 4 columns. And these grips here determine, this is our base point. This here tells us the distance from here to here, which is 3 feet. And this one and that one tells us how many rows and how many columns we have. From here to here is not very useful. We want to know what's from here to here is, and the same thing applies from here to here. So we want to change the base point to the bottom corner. And then without figuring out math, like yes, we know the window rectangle is 2 feet. But what happens if we're given that by somebody else and the information they gave you was close enough but not accurate, and you were just given a shape and they said, here's the window, go use it? Your only real solution is this, where we are going to take this grip, clicking on it, and dragging it till it meets the first one at the top, and then the same for the side. Now we know exactly this distance is the same from here to the same edge on the next one, be it to the right of it or above it. Now, with arrays, to the right and up, the value between is positive. If you want the number of rows to go this way, you want to say you're going to have a negative distance between rows. And just move your mouse so it'll refresh the screen. And if you know you don't need to have all these columns, you can just say 2. Now what this does for us is I can take, providing ortho is turned on, all of these now start at the same height. What happens if I want this to be only 1 row? I can change it in properties to 1. My alignment doesn't change. However, if this offset spacing between rows was a positive value, and I wanted this to be at the same height, that means I would have to manually drag and move all of this one down to the same height. So if this was a 4x4, I would have to manually from here and do that every single time. And then someone goes, oh no, that should have been 3. Now I have to manually reposition this again. So if you know you're going to have a plane here where all your windows are starting and stopping from, then you should have it start and stop at that point. Now, so that's a raise. So the next thing we want to discuss is this stuff, the siding on our building, which is a hatch. So let's set this to be the So we're going to hatch this shape, and we're going to stick a window into it. And what I'll do is I'll make 2 versions of this. So on the first thing before you run the hatch command is save your work. And we really should have been saving all along. So what we're going to do first thing first is set the layer we want, save our work, and then run the hatch command. Now we have 2 options. We can select object, or we can pick internal points. Picking internal points is going to be intensive for on the computer. And the farther you are away, every time you move your mouse, it's going to try and calculate, can I put a hatch where the mouse is? So for instance, if I made a rectangle here, then I made another one in here. So if I run hatch with pick internal point selected, it's going to try and hatch everything it sees. And sometimes you don't get exactly what you want. So if I zoom in here, it'll hatch that, or let me hatch that. So that's step one, deciding how this is going to go. Now this select object, that means if I was to hatch this circle, I can come into here and say select object and pick that object. So it's only going to hatch within that space. And if you notice, my computer's just kind of stopped for a minute and pondered life. Like you can see the mouse is here, but in CAD it's frozen. So just wait for CAD to come back. This is why you save your work prior to. Alright, so it's back. So now if I pick points on this one, and what I'll do, oh, cancel that. Oh, actually, this is a good exercise to show you something. So I've accidentally added two separate hatches. So if you come up to options and pick the one that says create separate hatches, I click on that and then I say close. Now I select if it will do it. There we are. So now it's created this hatch here, and this one's a separate one onto itself. They're no longer tied together. So if I didn't do that and say I moved my circle, this hatch would have moved with it because the hatch here and the hatch here are tied together. That's why I went and separated them out. Now if you look here on this hatch, look at all the grips we have going on. And this circular grip here is just so we can adjust the origin point, the hatch angle, and the scale, which we can easily change here. So this is very busy, and if you start hatching before you put in your windows and your trim, this way is going to cause you problems. So the solution to that problem is creating a hatch mask that says I'm going to take my shape and close the shape and then mask around my windows just like you'd be painting a room. You mask off the ceiling and the trim, and then you put your, so this is your masking off of all the space outside you don't want to touch. And now for ease of speed so you can see the difference, I'm going to come into here and on the A window layer I'm going to come and say off. So what that does is turns off my windows, so I see that I'm only being able to click this box here, which is my mask. And then I can come into hatch, select object, and then pick my window opening, and then my wall. And then I can say close. You could do it the reverse of clicking the outside first, then zoom in and click on the shape in the window. It depends on the hatch pattern you're using. So in this case, it's this angled line, but there are multiple. So I could have this brickwork here. This one I could have it as crosshatch. Some patterns you really have to jack them up to see them. So this value I'm playing with here is a scale factor. So if I make this 2, it's going to be 2 times larger. And this one is 35 times larger. Now there is one hatch that's special, and that's the very bottom of this list, called user. And that, if you look here, it's saying that this is hatch spacing. That means for every line here, it's going to be this value to the next one. So if we're doing 6-inch spacing between lines, I make that 6. If I'm doing horizontal siding, 0 degrees. If I'm doing vertical siding, it's 90. Now, since I just threw these windows in any old spot, I doubt my hatch pattern will line up correctly, but we'll give it a shot anyways. So this window, we want to have all of our siding to start and stop at an edge. So we can manipulate where the pattern starts by using this set origin. And then I can click where I want it to start. And you'll see that this line here merges to here and merges to here. Now, because this second window did not have a nice defined value, it's kind of offset a little bit. So in your exercise, if you look here, it starts and stops at a line. So this case over here won't happen. So as long as you set it once, it will replicate to your other windows. So that is user, defines the distance between consecutive lines and the angle. So if this was 45 degrees, they'd all be going this way. And horizontal is horizontal. So that's the pattern in use. That's the color, which is saying it's by layer. So if we change the hatch color of elevation siding hatch to something else, this would be reflected there instead of coming into here and forcing it to be a separate color. So that will always be green no matter what layer it's on. For hatching, if we have a layer, use the layer properties. So that's hatching. So this here is that air roof layer. So you can just come in here and find the one that says it's assuming I have it. I don't have that one, so what you could do is take like this ANSI one and then just set this to be like -45, so it's horizontal lines, and then just manipulate the pattern to be larger. You could do that. You could do, oh, here it is, RR roof. I'm just blind. So that's how the roof pattern will look. So as I said, always save before you hatch. Got rectangle in there, we got array. Scale command. That we'll cover next week. So here's elevation 1. Analyze it. See how you're going to go about drawing it. What steps can you take? You know, if you look at these windows, they're symmetrical. You know, do you want to put in the windows first, then hatch it? This here, 1212, is referring to a 45-degree slope. Use what you've learned. Line, you know how to draw along an angle. You have polylines, so you can make things in one shot instead of doing a short line segment and another line segment and another one. One thing to remember, there's a grade line here. It needs to be a polyline because you're going to be taking this and setting a global width to it. So you could say this is 2 inches, or you could say it's 4 inches. And it grows from either side of the grip. So you might have something that you'll see here that you have a bit of it hiding from this. Now any measurements you do from here up will be off of this point to here. So I guess to get you started here, whenever you start a drawing, start somewhere simple. In this case, at the bottom, going up above grade. So whenever you're given a minimum and a maximum, go somewhere in the middle. So say 1 foot. You can go higher, but no less than 8 millimeters, or 8 inches, sorry. So what we're going to do is draw up here. And I'm just going to pick a random spot here. So I said we're going to go up a foot. How you plan on drawing, it's up to you. Now we have a bump out where the base trim starts, which is 2 inches. And then so you're always going to be flipping back and forth between this and that, because this will be giving you details. So the next detail we're going to look at is this one. So we need this next. So we're going to go up 10 inches. So say 10 inches. And then back over 2, so we're in line with where we started. Now this next piece, you'll notice that it's going from here to the top of the window to the soffit here. We can take out the calculator and add these two values together, but you need one of those fancy carpenter calculators. Regular calculators won't do that. However, CAD's got your back. So CAD Instead of, so I'm still in the command of polyline, so I'm going to do single quote CAL, short for inline expression calculator. Hit enter. And now I give it a mathematical expression. So I'm going to say 7 foot 11 inches plus 1 foot 4 inches. Enter. And it calculates it out for me as 9 foot 3 inches. So expression calculator is your friend, especially when you're doing this in imperial. And if your imperial is not your favorite units of measure, let CAD do the work for you. So now we're going to go back to that detail again, and it says 1 foot 4 inches, and we go up 10 inches. And here's where we hit escape. And the reason for that is, you see the line here, the thicker bolder line is on the outside, and we're currently at this point right here. So we need to draw this line first, because we can't do any of the other lines until we have this one satisfied. And because that roof slope said for every 12 units over we have 12 up, that means a 45-degree angle. And if you don't believe me, we can say 12 by 12 and then close. And then we can do this, 45 degrees. So now what we're going to do is say elevation siding trim, then draw a line from that point, and back to week 2, when we talk about entering in information, we're overriding an angle here. So we're going to say less than 45, enter. And in our drawing, it doesn't tell us how long from where to here it is. We don't care. We just want a 45-degree angle. Now we can come back and fill in this piece here. So first thing we need to do is offset this outwards 2 inches. So we can go back to outline, come back to fill words are hard, offset, and change it from layer source to layer current, current being outline. And this will be our 2 inches. And we're done. So that gets us the top line, but how are we going to get this line here? So we can do the same thing again. We're going to track over and say 2 inches and draw a line straight up. So that will satisfy this corner and this corner here. So what we can do now is fill it, make this corner, and then we can do trim, enter, have this extend out, so hold down shift and click, and then we can come back in here and delete the extra line. And we can even come in here and delete this, and then come back and draw a line from here to here. We could have taken this and broke it and then changed the layer properties. This amounted to about the same amount of work either way. So now we have this piece going on here. And that's saying that that's a 10-inch wide fascia board, typical. So that means from this white line going this direction, so that means we're going to offset this that way. And we also have a line going up this way, which is 6 inches. So what we can do, so it's trim. From here, draw a line 6 inches over, and then straight down to where it meets the base trim. And then we can extend here to here. But first we need to offset this going this way. And that was 10 inches. Now we can fill it, have it extend up to here. So that is all the dimensions we know about on that house so far. And we know, based on the numbers, from this window to the outside wall is 5 feet. From the outside to here is 5 feet. And we have no numbers on this side, so that means this must be a mirror of this. So now you have two things you can do. You can put in your windows now on the left side. So you can throw in your window here. But the big piece of information is this 26 feet. That's going from this line to that line. And if you stick it in the middle, that'll be exactly the same distance away. So I'll draw a line, that's siding, from there 26 feet over to the right. And then I'll just copy that down to the underside. I can take all of this, so trim excluding these two lines, and now mirror along the midpoint. And if I had a window here, I could have mirrored that over to this side as well. Since I had them turned off. That's going down, so that's good. Let's copy that. Copy selection. So I'll just plop this in here. I have to go look at the numbers to figure out where it's supposed to go. So from the outside to this edge is 5 feet. And from there down it's 1 foot 4. So I can move down 1 foot 4. And then what I can do is to move again and track it. So have the mouse track and move your mouse to the left and then say 5 feet. So I know from where my cursor is to the new position, it's 5 feet away from the outside edge. So if I measure that, it'll say from here, perpendicular over is 5 feet. So if I put the window in here first and I mirrored it, I would be done already, with the exception of saying we want 2 rows. See, the rows are still at the same height as the windows. So now to fill in this, you can either do the trim and extend, but the better approach is fill it. Now you just have to connect the right lines together. Populate your other window as required. Hatch it. So what's that? Was that a 4 window? See, like I have 3 here, but if it's supposed to be 4, I'm not breaking anything. Or shouldn't be anyways. So I will correct this number here and here. There is a discrepancy in the units. So I will fix that. So when you are looking at the assignment, that value will be correct. So use the value in the assignment, not in this video. But hatch it. Chimney, when you're doing the chimney, do this portion first and then move it in place. Don't try and draw it in the same location. Like I said, do not put in these. These guys we will not put in. This here we will be adding next week. This here is going to be on your notes layer. These are notes. Now let's talk about this one real quick. This is a dimension that has been overridden to have additional text here. So let's go to dimension, say linear from here to here. That's our 1 foot 4. If I double click on the text, you will see that there is a purple background and then there's a blinking cursor on the left or on the right, depending on which side I moved the cursor. Now I can start typing information here and say overhang typical. And then I can just stretch this out. If I wanted this to be in multiple lines like that, I could do that. And then when I'm done monkey about with the text, I hit close. And then I hit escape because I'm still in a text edit mode. Now what I can do is take this and just have it so I see the number and then I have this hanging off the side of it. This is one whole dimension. Do not put text here because that text is separate from this and you have a chance of having it deleted on you, having it move so it no longer is attached to this 1 foot 4 dimension. Now the other nice thing about overriding text is when you're doing an existing building where you're saying it's going to be plus or minus a value because you don't know what it is. So you're just saying that it's a known value and it possibly is correct. You know, you're giving that wiggle room to draw within. So I will leave this here. You have next week we are going to be discussing printing, how you go about setting up to print from models from your layout, and look into model in the right spot and make sure that you have enough information in that spot so you don't have to start manipulating all of your notes and your dimensions when you're in the final moments and it has to go out the door to get plotted. You want to go to your boss and say, yeah, it's done, I'm gonna go have a coffee. So as I said, next week we'll discuss scale. So next week is week 7, which is printing. Week 8 is your break, your reading week, catching up on homework or catching up on sleep. So there'll be no classes on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Now the following week is week 9, which is a work period for you to complete your 2 drawings for me. Those being this one and the one we've been using throughout your class. So these are going to be submitted. It's going to be submitted as a drawing file and a PDF. You're going to be submitting me 4 files at the end of week 9. If you don't submit before week 9, at the end, so your class is done at 5. If it's 5:01, it's late, it will be 0. If you have any questions between now and next week, email and we will discuss it on the Q&A. So good luck.